Salut à toi, nouvelle vidéo aujourd'hui. Tu vas découvrir l'interview que j'ai réalisée avec Bill O'Hanlon. Donc Bill O'Hanlon, juste en quelques mots, c'est quelqu'un qui a plus de 40 ans d'expérience dans l'accompagnement thérapeutique, dans l'hypnothérapie. Il a été le jardinier de Milton Erickson. Oui, oui, tu ne rêves pas. Le jardinier dans un premier temps de Milton Erickson. Il raconte ça d'ailleurs dans cette interview. Et ensuite, il a étudié auprès de Milton Erickson. Il va raconter des anecdotes sur sa vie, sur ses clients, sur Milton Erickson, sur Bandler et Grinder. Bref, c'est un bijou. Alors évidemment, c'est en anglais, donc tu as une option avec la roue que tu vas pouvoir cliquer dessus, puis aller ensuite dans les sous-titres et tu mets français. Et comme ça, tu pourras accéder à ce qu'il raconte de manière traduite. Voilà, donc brièvement, quelque chose qu'on n'a pas abordé, il a écrit également plus de 37 livres sur l'accompagnement, sur l'hypnose et sur la thérapie. Il a créé un mouvement qui s'appelle la thérapie orientée solution, donc un courant entre guillemets issu de la PNL, de son travail avec Erickson, bref, avec toute une panoplie d'outils qu'il a mixé et qu'il a nommé thérapie orientée solution. Également, on ne l'a pas abordé ici, mais dans plusieurs de ses ouvrages, il explique que quand il était jeune, il était extrêmement déprimé et également suicidaire. Et il a aussi donc écrit des bouquins pour pouvoir aider les gens à remonter la pente. Donc c'est un vrai bijou. Régale-toi. Si tu as des questions, tu vas dans la barre des commentaires et tu poses tes questions. Prends soin de toi.
Okay, let's go. So first, thank you very much, Bill, to accept to do this interview. I've read books of you and I've also listened to seminars and things. And after this, I have a lot of questions for you, if you are okay.
All right.
So the first one is you have met Milton Erickson in the past and you studied with him. Do you have funny or surprising anecdotes of him and you?
Yes, maybe two. The first is I met him at the university where I went to university. I was working at an art gallery at the university, and he came to see some paintings of a patient of his, but also to buy. He collected Seri Indian carvings, which were ironwood carvings from some Native Americans in Arizona and Mexico. And so when he arrived, he was in his wheelchair.
Yeah.
And his wife and daughter were with him. And our gallery was on the third floor. So there were only steps in those days, no elevators, no lifts. So they said, the mother and the daughter came up and said, we would like, to bring him up to the gallery, but there's no elevator and he can't climb the stairs. He's paralyzed. So we talked about it and I said, well, there's a ramp that we bring big art pieces up to the third floor where it's a very steep ramp, but it comes to the third floor from the ground floor, and I think I could push his wheelchair up this ramp. And we went out to the parking lot to look at it, and they looked at it, the mother and the daughter, and they were just shaking their heads. It was very narrow, and it was very steep. But he looked at it and said, yes, I think the boy can do it. I was very small, and he had gained some weight being in a wheelchair, but I was committed to helping him get up there. So we did. It was difficult, but I was able to push him up the ramp, and they were nervous the whole time, the mother and the daughter, but we got him up there. But I hadn't thought through the whole sequence, because coming down at that angle was really scary. It was very, very hard. But we got him up there, and he bought the carvings that he wanted, and he saw the paintings that he wanted. And then I took him back down, and I was sure we were both going to die. It was very frightening because it was so steep, but I just took it step by step and got him down, and he had faith. He said he was never worried. So I helped him into the car, and then he left. And one of my fellow students who worked at the art gallery said, "Do you know who that was?" "No, I have no idea who that was." She said, "He's a famous psychiatrist, and you're in university to study psychology. You should know about it."
Mhm.
His name is Milton Erickson. I've never heard of him. None of my teachers, none of the professors ever mentioned him. But there was an article in a popular US magazine, Newsweek magazine, that week, and it was about Jay Haley's book called Uncommon Therapy. And it was called Svengali in Arizona. And I read that article, and I was instantly fascinated by this strange psychiatrist who wasn't like anything I was learning in my psychology studies, doing these amazing things and curing people who were impossible cases. And I began to study everything I could find about his. He didn't have any books out. He only had articles, but I found every article that I could. And I started studying everything that I could. And I looked him up in the telephone book, which they had in those days. And there was his address. And I wrote him a letter asking if I could come to study with him. And he must have gotten the letter, and he called me up and said, "O'Hanlon," I told him that I was a gardener, that I used to work as a gardener between my undergraduate and graduate studies. And that maybe I could do some gardening because I had no money to pay him for his teaching. And so he called up and said, "O'Hanlon Gardening Service," and there was no such business. But I said, "Yes, this is Bill O'Hanlon. Is this Dr. Erickson?" And he said, "Yes, this is Dr. Erickson.
Yeah.
Can you come out to see me at 11 o'clock on Tuesday?" And I had a class at my university, but I didn't care about that. I said, "Yes, I will be there." And I was a hippie at the time. I had very long hair.
Okay.
And I wore my best hippie clothes, which John Lennon taught us was my white suit. And when I arrived there, he set me to work in the garden. I thought it was all a metaphor, but it wasn't a metaphor. He wanted me to work in his garden, and here I was with white clothes on, kneeling down in the dirt, working in his garden. And I worked in his garden for several weeks, and finally his wife came out and said, "Milton, the boy wants to learn something about therapy. We should schedule him for some sessions." And she wrote me in. I was so shy, so I was so thankful she came out and rescued me. But I came back every couple of weeks to work as a gardener and to sit in on his sessions. And that's how he taught me. And he had a big influence on me that's lasted till this day. And that was in 1973. So it was a long time ago.
Yeah. And especially about that, he has also a big influence on me and other people. How do you, I don't know, manage this? You know, when, for example, you saw, you learn, you hear about Milton Erickson, and how do you take your own place or build your own style, even you are, you know, a lot influenced?
Yes, you know, I play guitar. And at first, when you play guitar, you just imitate the people that you love. You just try and play exactly like them because you just want to sound like them, but you can't. Nobody can be Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton or James Taylor or some of those people that you just love. But on the way, studying what they do and trying to reproduce what they do, you develop your own voice and your own style. And that happened to me. It took me many years. First, I just wanted to understand what he did because it was so confusing and so overwhelming and so magical. He seemed to always know what he was doing and always have brilliant ideas, and I didn't feel all that brilliant. I wasn't a storyteller. I never told stories in life. or in therapy. So I studied stories and I learned to tell stories and I got good at telling stories. I studied his work and I studied other people's work as well. And I found my own approach, but it took me some years. And I remember, one day when I had a client and it was like, oh, I did something really creative like Dr. Erickson did. I came up with an intervention that was really brilliant that I wouldn't have been able to do earlier in my career. So it took me many years, maybe 3 or 4 years of studying intensely and practicing and going to workshops in NLP and other things to try and learn people who'd studied him and had ways of thinking about his work. And I read every book that I could. And after a while, it just got into my bones and came out as me instead of Dr. Erickson. I could never be like him. He was fearless, and I am not fearless. He would insult people. I couldn't do that. I'm too nice. I can't do that. Even though it would work, I can't do it. And so I had to find my own way of using the brilliant ideas and methods that he had without being him. Yes.
Okay, great. So you said you also studied NLP?
I did. I studied, in fact, Bandler and Grinder, I studied with them before there was the name neurolinguistic programming. They hadn't made up that name. They were calling it patterns of communication and change. That's what I studied.
Yeah.
And they had the first book out, which was called The Structure of Magic. And I read that. And Milton Erickson and Virginia Satir and Gregory Bateson gave an endorsement for it. So I was like, I have to read these people. And then I went to a workshop with them, with those two, and it was amazing. And they said, you live right next to Dr. Erickson. Why aren't you studying with him? And I said, oh, I could not. Why would he want to meet me? I mean, I'm just a graduate student. They said, he's really open. Just call him up, which I couldn't do. I was way too shy. But they encouraged me to go study with him. And so I did. And then I got certified in NLP in 1977, the first certification program. I was with Connie Ray Andreas and Steve Andreas and a few of the early people that were into NLP early on. And I did my master's dissertation, my master's thesis when I was at university on patterns of communication change before neurolinguistic programming was created. Yeah.
Okay, great. I also I enjoy a lot. I did my master practitioner and training trainer with Bandler, and I like very much. And it is, for example, in your book, this one, the one you talk about pattern, and breaking pattern. Is it a NLP approach who help you to build this kind of stuff, or a kind of?
Yes, 2 or 3 influences on that.
Yeah.
Before I studied NLP, I studied family therapy.
Yeah.
Jay Haley and the MRI approach, and the MRI practitioners had studied with Milton Erickson, so they were influenced by him. Gregory Bateson and Milton Erickson were big influences there. And they had this idea that problems were just patterns that repeated that weren't helpful. Mm-hmm. And so you were just supposed to disrupt those problem patterns, the thinking patterns, the point of view patterns, and the action patterns, the interaction patterns. So that was the MRI approach, and I'd been very influenced by that. And when I came across Milton Erickson's work and then NLP, to me, NLP was more precise. It told me more of what to do, but also it had built into it, figure out what patterns aren't working and disrupt them, change them.
Yeah.
Figure out a pattern that works and increase that, and model on people who have patterns that work. That was the brilliance of NLP to me. Yeah. So you find somebody who knows how to do that or has succeeded at that thing, and you learn that pattern, you imitate that pattern and make it your own, and you find out what doesn't work, what keeps repeating, like the MRI model said, that doesn't work, and you jam it, you change it, you stop it, you channel it, you do anything to not repeat the same thing over and over again. So those were big influences on me. And then I had studied some other things, the Alexander method, which was a body work method, which talked about body patterns being part of problems. And you become aware of the problem pattern. Feldenkrais did that later. Body patterns, and you change body patterns to change emotional and psychological and physical problems. So all those were influences on me. And I started to see the whole world as just patterns.
Yeah.
DNA is all patterns. Social interactions is all patterns. And I thought, okay, all we have to do is figure out patterns that don't work and disrupt them, figure out patterns that do work and increase them.
Yeah.
And that helped create my own approach, which I started to call the solution-oriented approach, which was find patterns that work in people's lives when they come in with a problem. Find patterns that work in people's lives in the past, the present, and future, and get them to do more of those rather than fight against the problem. So that led to my own approach later, which emphasized more patterns that work rather than jamming patterns that don't work.
Okay, great. I am the same school of you. I am also influenced by NLP, but as I tried some things on me, and I know that breaking pattern is so powerful. And about that, on your books, you talk about action. I don't know if it's my own filter, but do you think that action is a big move, to help people getting better, or is just my own filter that's saying that?
Yes, I think, I don't know, because I think if you change your point of view, you can change the actions. If you change your actions, it may change your point of view. If you change the context in which everything is occurring, it could change your actions and point of view. So for me, there are 3 places to intervene.
Yeah.
And one is change the doing, the action.
Yeah.
One is to change the viewing, your point of view, your perspective, your mindset. And the third one is to change the context, which I got from family therapy and ecology, is change the surroundings. And if you change the surroundings, the culture, even geography, that you could sometimes change the viewing and the doing. So it's all 3. But yes, I think I have a bias towards action, partly because I lived so much of my life in my dreams and in my head, and it wasn't changing much. And when I first wrote a book, I wasn't sure I could write a book. I thought, that's a very big thing. I don't know if I dream, and I can take little actions, but can I take such a big action to get a book finished and out in the world?
Yeah.
That really showed me the impact of taking action and changing things in the realm of action. So yes, I think I have a little bias, and that's why I called that book "Do One Thing."
Yeah.
Rather than think one thing.
Yeah.
Like Apple had a ad slogan. It was called "Think Differently."
Yeah.
And that's more you changing your thinking, which I understand, and it's good. But I think I have a slight bias towards action. Yes.
Yeah. I had the same problem in the past. I was overthinking, and when I started just to do things, and it literally changed my life. So yeah, I think I understand what you're saying.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think it used to be first you have to change your psychology or your feelings, and then you can act. But sometimes you can act, and it influences your feelings and your point of view.
Yeah. And when you say point of view, you talk about like reframing, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Well, deframing, which is challenging the old frame of
Yeah,
reference.
yeah.
And reframing, offering a new frame of reference, same thing. De-patterning
Yeah.
and repatterning. You know, it's both sides of it, I think. You can challenge the old patterns or disrupt the old patterns and then offer a new pattern of viewing and doing and context.
Yeah.
Yes.
And is it the same thing when you say on your book, you can expand, you know, the view, this is reframing, yeah?
Right. A certain kind of reframing.
A certain
yes,
kind, yeah,
yes.
yeah. Okay, great. And I lost my other question. You said...
That's all right.
No, it's okay. You said blah, blah, okay, yeah, and about that, you say people can change, I don't know the word, neighborhood, no, environment, yeah?
Yeah, context and environment.
Context, yeah.
Context, yeah.
And about that, how do you help people? Because a lot of people have fear, you know? They fear trying new things, they fear meeting people. How do you encourage people to try things, you know, when they are fearful?
Yes. So I think of a case of Dr. Erickson's that illustrates this really well. He was working with a man who was very depressed, could barely leave his house and wasn't getting any better. And Erickson was trying all his methods and they weren't working. So Erickson had a simple suggestion for him. I want you to go be depressed at the library, bibliothèque. You know, what? And the guy's like, what? Why? He goes, just do it. Just promise me you know, you can still be depressed. Just, you know, you come to my office so we know you can get out of your house and get somewhere. Just go to the library and be depressed there. So the guy does. He goes there for several days and finally he gets kind of bored sitting there. And he thinks, you know, I've always wanted to learn about exploring caves, you know, going into caves and exploring caves. So he goes to the library and he says, do you have any books and magazines about exploring caves? And the librarian shows him, yes, you know, we have this. So she shows him where it is. He goes there, and every day he's getting out magazines and reading about it, thinking maybe someday if he gets less depressed, he'll go explore a cave, try it. And one day, another fellow shows up looking at the cave exploring books. And the guy turns to this depressed man and says, hey, have you ever really done this? And the guy says, no, I'm just learning about it. He said, well, I haven't either. How about if we try it together? And they go out, and it becomes a new hobby for him. He gets very excited. He makes a new friend, and he comes out of his depression. And I was stunned when Dr. Erickson told that story. I thought, how did he know that going to the library, he would meet a friend and he would come out of his depression by exploring caves? And I realized after studying much of Dr. Erickson's work, he didn't know that. He just knew if the man was sitting in his home, the same thing was going to happen. But if he changed the context, if he had to be depressed in a library, something new could happen. So it may not have happened. But of course, Erickson didn't tell those case examples. He only told the ones where wonderful things happened. But it worked. And it worked partly because he changed the context. He was now depressed in a social setting rather than being alone at home and isolated.
Yeah.
And that's a good example of it. There are other examples of context. And I'll tell you one more because it's charming.
Yeah.
So this man comes to see Erickson, and they both have Norwegian background. And, you know, in America, we always say, you know, I'm Irish American, or I'm Swedish American, or I'm French American. We always think of where we came from before. So, all right. So he's Norwegian American, and Erickson is Norwegian American. And the name they have for themselves, which I didn't know, was Woodenhead. They're hard-headed. So he says, I came to see you as a psychiatrist because you're a wooden head like me. Okay. And I'm stubborn. And I have a problem. I have a drinking problem. So he said, but I want you to know who I am before we talk about that. And he gives him his scrapbook. Turns out he's a World War I he flew airplanes, flying ace hero. He shot down planes during the war and helped his country.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a hero and he had many medals. But after the war, he drank more and more, and he was still in the military, but he was never going anywhere. They were never going to make him leave the military because he was a hero one day, but everybody knew he was an old drunk who wasn't going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So he was frustrated because he just stayed at the same level and people just sort of dismissed him and didn't listen to him. So he said, and so he was telling Erickson that story while Erickson was looking at his scrapbook of all the newspaper clippings about what a hero he was and the fine-looking young man before this guy who's now been drinking and dissipated. And Erickson takes the scrapbook, throws it in the trash bin. And the guy's, what? That's my life. And he goes, that's not you. That's a hero. You're just an all broken down drunk. The guy's shocked and he goes, what I want you to do is leave my office, find the nearest bar. He had found out that the guy liked to drink a kind of a drink that's called a Boilermaker. It's a beer and a shot of whiskey or hard liquor. And he said, I want you to order 2 Boilermakers. Pick up the first beer and say, here's to that bastard Milton Erickson, and drink it down. And then pick up the shot and say, may he drown in his own spit. Drink it down. Saliva. And then pick up the second beer and say, here's to that bastard Milton Erickson. Drink it down. Pick up the shot and say, may he rot in hell. Drink it down. Guy's like, you're crazy. He picks up his scrapbook. He goes out of the office. He slams the door. He's mad. He goes to the first bar. He does order 2 Boilermakers. He picks up the first one, and he can't drink it. Why? Because that bastard who threw away his scrapbook told him he had to drink it. And it wasn't the same context of drinking anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now it was drinking because that guy who he was mad at told him he had to drink. And he was stubborn enough. He wasn't going to take a drink if that guy told him to take a drink.
Mm.
And he said as the first day he walked into a bar and didn't drink, and he began to change his drinking after that. I was like, wow, that is a change of context, because now he's drinking. He could do the same behavior, but it's not in the same context.
And he also maybe broke the pattern too, no? No?
Yeah, yes, definitely. He broke the pattern, yes. Well, also this pattern of this guy saying he was a hero and feeling sorry for himself. Like he didn't care about that. That's not you anymore, and it broke that pattern of mindset. Many interventions there, but I just thought that was a really good example of not just sending someone to the library, but sending them back to their original place that they would go to drink and changing what the surrounding meaning, if you will.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks for the sharing. And another question for Quentin Veyri, a friend of me. He asked, how do you determine the right pace of change for your client?
They determine that. I just offer all those possibilities. Sometimes I call my work possibility therapy, because as long as they're stuck in the same old patterns, they don't have the possibilities. I offer the possibilities, and they show me by how quickly they take those possibilities or change the pace of change. I haven't, it could take a year, it could take 2 years, it could take 1 hour. I don't know. I never know. I'm always hoping it'll be 1 hour, and sometimes it is, but I have no idea what the pace of change is. It's different for everyone. I just offer those possibilities and hope they take them as quickly as they can.
And when they ask you, "Oh, Bill, how many times or how many sessions or I don't know." How do you respond to this?
I hope this is the last one, I say. I hope you've gotten everything you need and that you make the changes. But if you didn't, we'll have another point.
Okay,
It's
because
okay.
I've done a lot of a session, and it was a question for me. For example, if you say it can be quick, some of them are I don't know the name in English. Oh no. If it's not quick, so I have a lot of difficulties to tell them that it's possible, so it can happen fast, but it can. You know what I mean?
Yes. So let me tell you a story. I had a client who he found a brochure in my waiting room at my office, and it was Bill O'Hanlon teaches brief therapy. It was in the workshop that was nearby. He came into my office and he was mad, very angry. What is this brief therapy? Because I hadn't told him what kind of therapy I did. I just did therapy. And he said, I've been seeing you for 1 year. He said, well, how come you didn't use brief therapy with me? I said, I did, but so far your brief therapy has taken 1 year. So it's different for everybody. And that's what I told him. I said, everybody's different. I can't say how long it takes. And it's not that you're worse than anybody or sick or anything like that. It's just people have different paces of change. That's all I can say. I would like it to be 1 minute and everybody's better, but it doesn't happen like that. Whereas Dr. Erickson say, we're as unique as our fingerprints. Everybody's different.
Yes, I know. I know that, but a lot of clients don't want to hear this,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I understand. They get upset. Well, I'm a therapist. It's okay if you're upset.
Yeah, okay.
It's just a feeling.
Yeah, okay. I look the other questions. Okay. I don't know if in books or you said that it's translated. Oops. I start with a wide range of possibilities. You adapt them based on how they respond. So, do you talk about non-verbal things like? And
mostly, yes. It's when I'm talking and you're nodding, you're going, or you're looking off and thinking. That's part of the nonverbal feedback.
Yeah.
And when I studied with Dr. Erickson, he was watching people so closely that he would get that feedback while he was talking and doing interventions.
Yeah.
That he would adjust the interventions based on their responses. So it's somewhat nonverbal, but it's also verbal. They come back and they say, you said these 3 things. Those other 2 didn't make any sense to me, but I went out and did this one and it was really helpful. Okay, well, so they like that kind of thing, or at least they did that time. So they're always shaping me and I'm always shaping them as to what works, what they appreciate. And what I like about hypnosis is they're sitting very still, typically, when we're doing hypnosis. And anything that shows up in their breathing or their body posture or their facial expression is very obvious. So if I start to go down one road and they're shaking their head or they're doing something more subtle, there's a change in breathing that I get a sense that they don't like that part. They're not going for that. I can shift to some other possibility, and then all of a sudden, and then they go deeper into trance, and I go, oh, okay, that one worked for them. So it's a constant adjustment. And when I first learned psychotherapy, I learned do techniques to people. Just do the techniques you learned in your training, and then they should work. And when I met Erickson, I realized, and NLP had that too, is read the feedback. But I think I was always reading the feedback after that and never set on one method, because one method, even the ones I love, don't work with everybody.
Okay, great. And two more questions about that. First, do you have, I don't know, strong references to people who want to increase their non-verbal things, you know? Because there are a lot of books and stuff, but how do we know that it's a good training or books or, you know, Paul Ekman or I don't know?
I write songs, and these days you know that because we've spoken about it a little. And all I can tell you is that the more I write songs, the better I get at it. The more I did therapy, the better I got at reading those nonverbals. There are books about it, but I think those books are more formulas. I think you just have to learn from your experience because it's so non-conscious. I can't even say what it is that I'm responding to. But sometimes I've been doing work with people and they're saying, I think you're psychic. You knew things about me that you couldn't know. And I go, well, probably, maybe. I mean, there is psychic stuff. I'm okay with that. But more, I'm probably reading the responses so subtly and so nuanced that I'm learning about you as we're going in very deep and non-conscious ways, ones I couldn't even speak about because I don't know, but they come out as stories or they come out as metaphors or possibilities or directions, and I don't know about that consciously. It's just a matter of practicing a lot and not living so much in my head, but watching people, which is, again, one of the things I treasured about studying with Dr. Erickson and studying NLP. When I studied therapy, it was a lot of theories. And I was thinking of theory, what method should I use here? When I studied NLP, they were like, watch the person, watch their breathing, watch their eye movements, watch their, body posture. Listen to the kinds of words they use. And I was so focused then on paying attention to them rather than distracted by all this, like you said, overthinking and theories, that I think I was learning more quickly about what worked and what didn't by focusing on paying attention. I remember once Ernie Rossi, who was one of Erickson's students who wrote many books with him, he was studying with Erickson, and Erickson caught him looking up at the ceiling at a certain point when Erickson was working with a patient. Erickson jammed him in the side with his elbow and said, Dr. Rossi, there's no patient on the ceiling. The patient is over there. Please observe. And I took that to heart because I was looking at the ceiling a lot when I started studying with Dr. Erickson. When I started with NLP, I was a lot in my head, and after a while I was in my senses. And I think that's a way to learn more quickly and get that feedback more quickly. So, that's one, a piece of advice I have is pay attention. Be in the moment.
So stop hallucinations and look at the real world.
That's right. Well, and to know that you're hallucinating, that isn't reality, but it's your idea of reality. And I think a lot of therapists believe what they see out there. They think, well, that is a narcissistic person. That is, that is, a neurotic, whatever. And it's like, you just made that up. Somebody made that up and taught it to you, and now you're projecting it onto that person. And I think most therapists believe that they're seeing objective reality over there. And I realize I'm seeing some objective reality, and I'm adding my own fantasies, hallucinations, frameworks, frames of reference, language, observational biases, personal biases, male biases, American biases, all the biases that we have. And I realized, I've sort of got a rough idea what's going on with that person, but most of the time I'm probably wrong. I'm probably wrong about a good percentage of it. And being that kind of humble rather than, I know what's wrong with you, To me, that's you know, it's the worst of, I know it's very popular in France, is psychoanalysis. They seem so certain of their diagnoses and their frameworks. And I'm like, you know, sorry. I think it's all made up. All those frameworks are made up.
Yeah.
And can you be more flexible? And my favorite psychoanalysts are the ones who really are open to it all. They're not rigid, you know, this is the diagnosis this is the method. Because I've met some like that, and I'm like, that's the kind of therapist I would like to go to. I don't care if they're psychoanalysts. I want somebody who's open and flexible and doesn't hallucinate onto me in an unhelpful way.
Okay, great. In another book of you said, I think it's Do One Thing Again. You know, you talk about connecting with a bigger self, or body, or your soul, or etc. And do you have any particular beliefs that helps you to help people?
Well, I mean, to go back to your original question, when I see people in therapy, it seems to me that, you know, again, this is something I got from Dr. Erickson and many other things in NLP, is that they have this amazing set of possibilities. They're big. They're huge in their possibilities. And they're acting in this very narrow range, especially when they're having problems.
Yeah.
They go small. And so for me, I started to think, you know, they disconnected from all those resources. That's what I loved about Dr. Erickson. He believed people had resources that they didn't know about, and they weren't using very well, those resources. And he believed that there were more possibilities for them. And so I think people disconnect from those resources. And part of my job, I think, is to help people connect to those resources, whether it be their body, their bigger self, you know, that less constricted and fearful and selfish self. And they connect to other people, which is, you know, there are resources around us. And they connect to something bigger, the universe, you know, spirituality, whatever it may be. And so for me, that's more my belief, is that we're all connected in a certain way on the planet, in this planet, and humans, and life is all connected, and the universe is all connected. You know, I was raised Catholic, and I went away from that long ago, but so for me, that's probably my spiritual belief, that there's something bigger going on, and there's a bigger story that we're living on in this life, and that we don't know all the contours of that story or all the chapters of that story. We don't know where it's leading. We only know we're in the middle of that story, but it's a big story. Potentially, it's a big and amazing story. Like the best movies or books that you read, they're these big stories that really move you. Everyone, to me, has that potential kind of life. And then some people live only one chapter over and over again, or one page over and over again.
Yes.
I'm saying there's a bigger story. Can we connect to that? That's probably my sensibility or belief system.
Okay, great. Okay, another question. I think, I'm not sure, but did you practice self-hypnosis? And if so, did you self-hypnotize the same way as you hypnotize other people, or no?
I don't use it very much, but I have. I find it easier when someone else is hypnotizing me, because there's a bit of a conflict. I'm trying to run the show while I'm experiencing it. And for me, hypnosis is more of a letting things happen rather than making things happen. So hypnosis, self-hypnosis is a little more challenging because of that, but I do use it on occasion. And I just remember with my body and with my experience what it's like to go into trance. And I revisit that. And then I go into a trance. Usually for me, my hands go numb and my breathing changes. And I stop thinking so much because like you were talking, I tend to think a lot. So I stop thinking so much and I'm just being. And I'm sinking into my bodily experience more, or then I leave my body in a certain way. I don't notice my body. So there are sort of phases of that. I typically only use self-hypnosis when I'm ill and I need to function, because it's okay with me to be ill. If I get a cold or a flu, it's just like, that's just the body taking care of what it needs to take care of. But sometimes I've flown to Paris and I have 250 people waiting to hear me the next day and I'm sick. I got flu or something. And I just go into a trance and I don't even tell myself anything because I know why I'm going into trance, so I can help my body heal more rapidly and feel better by the time I have to do my workshop and then my formation in the next day. And so I just then go from trance to sleep. I get a good night's sleep. I wake up and I'm usually better, not always. I'm always a little better, but sometimes I'm totally better and the illness is gone. Sometimes I'm not. I guess I've used it a couple of other times, but rarely. Because again, to me, life just unfolds as it does. It has problems, it has joys, it has neutral times. And I don't like to mess with that too much. I don't want to intervene with that. If I get stuck, I like some help from somebody else if I can't help myself. So I'll go see somebody and ask for help. And but so I typically don't do self-hypnosis.
Yes, because it's okay for you.
Yeah, even to have problems is okay. That's just part of life to me.
Okay.
Or like I was saying, if your clients get upset, or your patients get upset because it's not happening quickly enough, I go, it's okay to be upset. You know, to expect fast change.
A cool guy.
And be frustrated. Well, and to be upset with me, thinking I should be able to change you faster. I'm doing my best. I want to change you faster. It's just not happening that fast. So to me, it's all emotions and stories and problems are just problems. They just crop up in life. Problems just happen. You know, Erickson said one time to me that in our family, the Erickson family, we think of troubles as the roughage of life. And that means, you know, I don't know, roughage translates well, but it means that it helps things move. You know, if you just had the same day every day. I used to live in a place that had the same weather every day. And after a while, I was like, this is boring. It's always sunny and beautiful. There's no excitement in the weather. You know, and then I moved to a place where there was lots of change. It was like, oh, that's too much change. You know, too much trouble. But I think it's just, you know, it's just life. Life just changes. Sometimes it's happy. Sometimes it's sad. Sometimes you're stuck. Sometimes you're moving. Sometimes it's glorious and sometimes it's terrible and you get your heart broken. And, you know, it's just part of life. I think that's the good news about being a therapist. I was a therapist. I don't practice anymore, but I was a therapist for 40 years. And it's hard for me to get really upset about things. Just like, yeah, that's part of life too. You know, you get divorced, you lose your job, someone dies, you know, it's just, that's how life goes. And it doesn't bother me that much. It's just like, yeah, I've had that happen. You'll have that happen. You know, again, one of the MRI guys, John Weekland, I brought my stepdaughter to come to see him because she was thinking of going to university right near where he worked in Palo Alto. She was thinking of going to Stanford. And she was thinking of becoming a therapist. So I said, oh, you got to meet my friend. He's this amazing therapist. And he was talking to her. And he said, you know, what I've realized is life is just one damn thing after another. But he said, when people come to therapy, the problem is life has become the same damn thing over and over again. And he was smoking a pipe, took a thing of his pipe and he sort of tamped it and he said, so my job as a therapist is to get people from the same damn thing over and over again to one damn thing after another. And one problem after another, that's life. But when it's the same problem and you're tortured by it again and again, it becomes discouraging. And I've come to think of that. You know, life is just one damn thing after another, or one great thing after another. It's both. You know, it's one great thing or one bad thing after another. It just happens. Problems happen, joys happen, and they just all go through unless you get stuck.
Okay, great. Another question. What is the interest of indirect approach in suggestion for you?
I like the indirect approach because, again, I don't have to be the expert on that person's life. I can suggest possibilities that may evoke. I mean, that was the big revolution for me studying with Erickson. Every other therapy, except maybe the best of psychoanalysis, every other therapy tried to intervene in people's lives with a model that they thought was right. Here's pathology and here's health. And my model, change it, you know, cognitive therapy says, change your thinking and you will get healthier. What I like about the evocation approach is you're evoking that person's solutions and resources, and they solve their own problem, not the way you think they should solve it, but in a way that fits for them and is right for them. And for me, when I came across Erickson's work, it took me a few years to realize he wasn't prescribing and intervening to fix someone. He was hoping that he could evoke something within them where they would solve their own problems. And that was a revolution to me because I always thought, here I'm the expert therapist who needs to solve this person's problem quickly, you know, as quickly as I can. And after that, I thought, I'm not the expert. I'm an expert at creating a context to evoke their strengths and abilities and their ability to change. That's my only job, is to connect with them, you know, get them to trust me and evoke whatever will help them change. It could be a change in the point of view, could be change in actions, could be change in interactions, it could be something else. And my job is to evoke, and then they're going to carry on the change. I don't need to direct that change. And that, to me, was a revolution because I didn't have to know everything. I didn't have to be the expert on every diagnosis or every problem or every method. All I had to do was be able to engage with that person and evoke, and then they could solve their own problems in their own best ways. And I also wouldn't impose my values and beliefs on them.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is always worrisome to me because those values and beliefs change. In the 1950s, homosexuality was a disease, and you know, women should have orgasms only with men penises rather than plural orgasms. You know, there are always value systems. I guess way back in the days of slavery, there was some alienist, some psychiatrist who diagnosed slaves who ran away as having a disorder because they were running away from their slave masters. It's like, it's so influenced by your beliefs and your culture. You have to be careful of not imposing your values on people or your ideas of what's a problem on people or what's a solution.
And about that, when you hear stupid belief system in your client, do you can challenge it? Do you do this kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I offer the possibility. I tell stories. You know,
Okay.
I tell stories. I like I've been doing with you. I just tell stories, and then hopefully that changes their mind. They come back and go, you know, I think that was a stupid point of view. I didn't realize that, but now I realize that. But I don't tell them that's stupid, change it. I mean,
and do you have
I can
an
say,
example when I don't know this kind of belief? How do you challenge it?
I can't. I'm trying to think of a specific example. Yes. Okay, I can think of one.
Mm-hmm.
This woman came to see me, and she said that she was about to get fired from her job. She worked in a small office, and her boss really liked her, and he liked the job she did. But in recent years, she'd been having too much time off work. And why did she have too much time off work? She developed a physical problem, spastic colon. And the spastic colon was, she would have to call in sick. And it was a small office, and they needed her there. And after she'd missed so many days in a year, her boss said, I really like you. You do the job when you're here, but I can't have you gone this much. I'm going to have to fire you and hire somebody who can be here more consistently. So she said, well, give me a chance. I'll work on it. So she came to see me, and she told me that she knew what she was under a lot of stress, and she knew what the source of stress was. Her two daughters were very rebellious, and they were getting in trouble all the time. And they had since they were teenagers, and now they were 18 and 19 years old, and they were still living with her. And she was rescuing them from all the problems they get into. They get into financial problems. Both of them got pregnant, needed to have an abortion. They'd run up a large phone bill when they tried to move out on their own and couldn't pay it, and she had to rescue. She was divorced from their father, and she lived with, she was married to another man, their stepfather. And they were tearing their hair out trying to deal with these girls who were wrecking their lives and causing a lot of stress. And she said, you know, we've tried to put our foot down, but they just rebel and we can't control it. So I told her the story of my father. He told me one time he raised 8 children, and that he learned that the way children learn about life is they have to run into a brick wall. You know, and it's like they're riding a motorbike, riding for a brick wall. You, the parent, can see they're going to get into trouble. So you give them a lecture. You look out, you're going the wrong direction. You're heading for a brick wall. You know, stop that motorcycle, turn the other way. And he said, they don't listen to you because they think they know best. They're teenagers and they're strong-willed. And he said, usually they give you a rude gesture and they speed up the motorbike and they run into the brick wall still. And he said, my first 2 children, my father told me, my first 2 children, I stood in front of the brick wall giving them a lecture, and they hit me too. And I suffered the consequences. He said, after 2 of them, I got smarter and moved over to the side, gave them the lecture. They sped up, gave me the rude gesture, and hit the brick wall. He said, after 6 of you, I got smarter, and I said, look, I'm an old man. I've been around for a while. I think you're heading in the wrong direction. I think you're going to not like the consequences. But you probably won't listen to me because none of the other kids did. But he said when he'd say it that way, they'd slow down the motorbike, no rude gesture, and sometimes they'd even not hit the brick wall. But most of the time, they'd still hit the brick wall. Just not as fast and not as hard. And so he said, it tore my heart out every time I saw them making a mistake, doing something that could harm their future. But I realized that's how they learn. They learn from experience, and you can't stop that. You just have to let them have the experience. So that was the story I told her. I was just talking to her, and I said, come back and we'll do some hypnosis. She came back the next time and said, I don't need hypnosis. The problem is solved. I said, what? She said, that story, I went home and told it to my husband. We sat our daughters down and said, here's $500 each. You're moving out today. And if you can't make it on your own, you're on your own. You're adults and you need to survive on your own. And both of the daughters looked at the mother and the stepfather and said, we wondered when you do this. We're never going to grow up if you keep taking care of us and rescuing us. And the daughters moved out, and her spastic colon decreased, and she was able to go back to work. And I was like, okay, that was the story, and I didn't tell her what to do. I told her to go home, kick your daughters out, give them $500, and tell them they can't move back in. She would have said, I can't do that. I can't do that. I've tried. I can't. I was surprised that she did it. And I was surprised that she did it just from that story. But that's a way of evoking, I think. She's going to decide what to do with that. Now, I've told that story 100 other times. Nobody's ever had that great a result. But still, it happened that time.
Okay, great. I look. Okay. In a book, you talk, or a seminar, I don't know anymore, you talk about nominalization. And when you use nominalization, can you tell us why and when you use it and for what purpose?
Yes. Again, for several purposes, but one is to let people project their own meanings on the words that I'm using. So the second one is to invite them into hypnosis, into the trance, because they have to spend so much inner time making sense of such abstract words that they tend to go inside to think about these things, or they just they stop trying to make sense of the words and they drift, which is, again, conducive to hypnosis to me. So nominalizations are verbs that are turned into nouns. Again, I don't know how this translates very well in a different language.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got that. Okay, so, it's like...
difficulties.
There are many difficulties. There are many wonderings.
Resources.
I mean, that's a weird...
Yeah.
You may say, you're wondering about something.
Yeah.
But in English, you would say, there are lots of wonderings inside. And there are feelings, which again is a nominalization, because you feel things, but you turn it into feelings. There are feelings, there are sensations.
Yeah.
There are perceptions.
Do you say it's a kind of induction by confusion, a little bit, or?
Yes, a little bit by vagueness more than, but a little bit by confusion, but more vagueness. Confusion is a much more deliberate thing, It's like you can remember to forget and forget to remember and remember to forget and forget to remember. I mean, you can make it overwhelmingly confusing. So there is a little confusion. There's just a little ambiguity, and people have to think about it a little more, have to wonder about it. Sometimes it's just too much work, and they just stop and they close their eyes and they go into trance. And they just drift along on those words that mean something but don't mean something so specific.
Okay.
And so and then it also evokes things like relaxation can happen. Maybe they'll start to relax. Maybe they won't. But it's inviting of whatever those things that you're mentioning, perhaps. And again, not all of them will get evoked, but some of them typically do.
Okay, great. And another question. Alors, it's in French, so I have to translate the translation.
That's fine.
In this one, hypnosis.
Oriented towards solution.
Yeah. And in a book, in a page of book, you said, a question is when you use hypnosis and when you don't. And a part of your answer is when people can do things voluntary, I don't use hypnosis. And it's like
typically not, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I was very confused because you give the example of a cigarette. For me, in my map, smoking cigarette is unconscious things, not conscious things. So I'm a kind of lost.
Well, there are parts of smoking that are conscious and deliberate and parts of smoking that aren't. Walking into a store and buying cigarettes, that's a conscious, typical thing. You have to go do that thing. But often when people pick it up, they don't even notice they're picking up the cigarette and lighting it. So that part may be unconscious. The craving is unconscious, typically, nicotine craving. So I would do hypnosis with that part of it, but I would probably do another kind of intervention. Okay, every time you want to buy cigarettes, you have to walk around the block 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a very conscious, action-oriented intervention. And it's a pattern interruption and pattern change.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, or you have to clean out one closet or something, something you don't want to do that's going to interrupt that pattern of you walking into the store and buying cigarettes.
Yeah.
Every time you want to smoke one, you have to do 5 push-ups. I don't know, something that interrupts it. That's a conscious, deliberate intervention. And then to do the hypnosis part, I would do, about the cravings. I would talk about remembering when your body didn't crave it and having that memory be more at the forefront than the craving. And changing, and somehow your body knew how to change the blood chemistry and the breathing rate to change so you wouldn't feel the craving as strongly. I would talk about those kind of things.
Yeah.
That's more what I would do in trance. So to me, most problems are a combination of both, but some are pretty clearly, you're arguing with your partner or your wife or your husband or your boyfriend or girlfriend. And that's, even though there are unconscious parts of that, the anger that you get, the hurt that you get, those are non-conscious. But, okay, the next time you argue, turn around and don't look at each other.
Yeah. To break
That's
the patterns.
Deliberate intervention. Break the patterns. Right. Or one of you has to be quiet while the other one, or you have to write out all your complaints on a piece of paper and pass it back and forth. So the usual patterns don't happen. I would tend to go towards those interventions for conscious, deliberate problems, and then more the physical problems, like cravings. Craving nicotine is a physiological thing. Migraine headaches, cluster headaches, that kind of stuff. Those are more the hypnosis things. Again, I don't want to make a hard and fast rule, but someone asked me the question once: when would you use hypnosis? When would you not? And I thought, I never thought of that, but I know right when the person comes into my office within 5 or 10 minutes and they're talking to me, I go, I'm going to use hypnosis with this first, or I'm not going to use hypnosis with this first. Now, I might go ahead and use hypnosis in those cases, but that was my idea. And I thought, because to me, hypnosis is great. And you've read these books or heard me, to getting your hand on the controls of non-conscious, non-voluntary experience.
Yeah.
And that's mostly physiology. I mean, if I told you, when you get a cut, stop the bleeding right away. When you have a toothache, stop the pain. You would say, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But if I put you in trance, you might be able to stop the bleeding right away or stop the pain in your tooth right away. You can do it. But if I told you to do it deliberately, you wouldn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, the distinction. But, if it's not a helpful distinction.
Okay. It's much more clear now. And about that, you said that you didn't do a lot of self-hypnosis, but did you do a lot of hypnosis by another person who induced you, or not so much?
I did when I was learning. Yes, I a lot. I was, and I'm a good trance subject.
Okay.
You could just start talking. And I could go in very easily. So I'm a good trance subject, only because I've had so much experience at it. I wasn't that good at first, but I got better at it. So I didn't go to therapy too much, and I didn't go to hypnosis, but occasionally I would have someone hypnotize me for something or do some therapy for something, but very rarely. Again, I've had a pretty easy life in a certain way, but also I had that philosophy early on, sort of an ecological philosophy. It's like, be careful when you mess with the ecosystem of life. It's you can mess things up as unintendedly, with not the best of intentions, when you mess with things, because there's an ecology to all of life, to my body, to my life. And I wasn't all that worried about, again, emotions. I was a hippie back in the day, and I was in encounter groups, kind of everybody could let their feelings go. And I'd never worried about that kind of stuff. So I didn't get stuff too much. I had relationship problems. I haven't had too many physical problems, and I've had a few career problems in my life, but mostly they worked out. So I didn't do too much. But yeah, I would seek out somebody to hypnotize me if I had a problem, a chronic problem, especially, especially pain or physical problem. If I had a real physical challenge, I would ask somebody to hypnotize me, or I'd make a tape and hypnotize myself.
Yes, okay. And another technical question, for me it's confused about that. A big part of your work, if I understood, is evoking, okay? When you evoke something, you are kind of begin to create these things on your client, for example. Yeah? When you say the story of Erickson who said, if you knew what I'm thinking, you probably going, yeah.
With blush, yeah.
And my question is, okay, when you evoke, you want to create on the present a kind of special state, or not necessarily that the client feel right now on the present the thing. I don't know if I am clear to my question.
No, you aren't clear. I need you to ask it again.
Okay. For example, you evoke automatic changes.
Yes.
When you do this with a client, he begins, I think, in his unconscious to create, I don't know, a movement, a thing. Okay. And my question is not so clear in English. Do the client have to feel it something on the present, on the trance state, or not necessarily?
No, that's okay. I understand. Usually they do, but not always. Sometimes they'll come out of the trance and say nothing happened.
Yeah.
Which probably isn't true.
Yeah.
They couldn't tell anything. And sometimes they'll go out and nothing will happen. And sometimes I'll go out and say, I've had people say this, I swear I was not in trance.
Yeah.
I was convinced I was not in trance. I was convinced nothing happened. And I went out and everything was different. I don't know what you did. I don't know what changed, but all of a sudden everything is different. So, I mean, that's the whole idea of non-conscious change, is that they don't know it consciously all of a sudden, but something has shifted. To me, it's like thinking of if you were a physicist and you were able to get down to the quarks, that very small place in an atom, and you were able to tweak that quark, and then that changes the atom, and that changes the molecule, and that changes your muscles. I mean, you're getting down at such non-conscious level that the person doesn't have access to. And things can change. So they don't always have to experience, but sometimes they come out and say, wow, my whole body just relaxed when you said that. I knew I would never smoke again, whatever. They have a very clear, conscious knowledge that something shifted, but maybe half the time, no, they don't notice anything.
Yeah. And it's more clear now. For example, let's take you evoke blood pressure, that you can control your blood pressure. Okay, imagine the client has a headache, okay, and during the session of hypnosis, does he has or she have to feel or modify your blood pressure or not,
Yes, I think not feel it, not notice it. But I think they should have something should have changed with blood pressure, yes.
Okay.
And they should have access to it automatically changing when they need it, when the next time they have a headache. But sometimes during the trance, they'll get a headache and it won't go away during the trance, even though that's what we're working on. But later it will. So again, I'm never sure. I mean, it's great if they get a headache and all of a sudden it goes away instantly. And sometimes that happens, but not always. Again, it's the nature of evocation. It's the nature of non-conscious change.
Yeah.
That it's not so clear. It's not so obvious. It's not so linear that this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. It's complex and mysterious. It's mysterious. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would love it if they had the experience. That's more convincing. Then they convince their conscious mind. Yeah, I had a headache, and as soon as you said that, it went away. That was great. You know, they convince their conscious mind much more, which is nice to have a conscious mind as your ally. But I'm not entirely reliant on their conscious mind believing anything. I want them to have the experience of the change rather than the belief of the change. The belief can come after.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And so you recommend, as all practitioner of NLP and hypnosis, to learn storytelling, how to tell stories. Do you think it's a big part of the...
To me, well, especially Erickson's work. I mean, it's also a big part of human, you know, we like movies, we like TV shows, we like stories. When we get together with our friend, we tell stories. Hey, what did you do? Oh, you won't believe what happened to me. I was at the railway station, and this, you know, we tell stories. It's natural. It's a natural way of communicating between people. And to me, it's a natural way of changing minds, to change points of view. So yes, I think it's a great skill to have in any walk of life, in business. You know, you learn to tell stories and change minds, you know, and influence people. In therapy, I think is especially important because it's such a side door approach to change. And people are expecting that, you know, you're going to tell them what to do or what's wrong with them or diagnose them. And you're just telling stories, and they don't really realize they're not guarded against that. So the defenses are not put up to that kind of change. And I think that's really nice, you know, to be able to slide in through the non-conscious, creative, unconscious, as Erickson called it. I think that it's a good skill to have, storytelling in general.
Okay.
I mean, you've heard me tell the stories here, and maybe they've changed people's minds. I hope they have changed people's minds, or I think illustrated or evoked.
And do you think that, I don't know, hypnosis is, if you are a good storyteller, do you have to put people in trance, or no? Or it's kind of a trance, you know?
It's kind of a trance. I think there are natural everyday trance, and people who are good storytellers. You know, when I first learned storytelling, I wasn't a good storyteller. I wasn't a natural storyteller. And I got audio versions of great storytellers, not therapists, but just great storytellers. And I would start to listen to a story, and sometimes I was busy. I couldn't turn off the story until the story was done. It was so compelling. So that is a kind of a trance-like state. You're so fascinated, nothing else matters for that moment. You just have to hear what's going to happen with the story, and you're captured by it in a certain way. So yeah, I think stories, but other things. I mean, watching movies, watching TV, reading. There are lots of natural trances. Driving long distances. There are lots of natural trances. But story listening is, you know, story engagement is a really good trance. I like that kind of trance.
Okay, great. And another question about that, do you think that deep trance with amnesia and kind of things like that are useful or not so much, or I don't know?
I don't think about depth of trance too much. I know that was a big thing when I first learned hypnosis, but I found people who went into light trances changed, and people who went into deeper trances didn't. And some people are great trance. You know, they go so deeply. I do. I go very deeply into trance sometimes. And, you know, it's not always correlated with what equals change. I think it's nice to learn to go into a deep trance, but it's not necessary. So I don't think about depth. I just think about evocation. You know, did it evoke the change or did it not? That's all I can.
And do you have information of Erickson? Did Erickson thought that deep trance were good, or you don't know?
Yeah, I think he did. I think he thought the deeper the trance, the better. But again, he sometimes would help people and say they went into a light trance, but they changed anyway. But I think he came from more of that traditional hypnotic background that was you should go deeply into trance, and that was the best thing to make therapeutic change. Yeah, I'm not convinced of that.
Okay, great. And another question, in your out of blue, you made a book and a seminar also. When you evoke 6 strategies to get out of depression. So do you have, I don't know, a special structure in your approach with a client? Symptom approach, or I know that you're gonna say to me, yes, blah blah blah. I know that you're going to say me.
You could answer that question. No,
do you have strategies?
It's not in any particular order. That's just to write a book to make the strategies to kind of more accessible. But no, it's individualized with people, and sometimes I only use one, or sometimes I won't use any of those.
Yeah.
Because it's that particular person. But yeah, it's not in those orders. But almost always, back to your previous question, I would use stories. I tell stories in almost every intervention that I do.
Yeah, but do you have on your back, on your mind, kind of model, strategies or?
Yes, yeah. Oh, definitely, I do.
Okay.
I do, but I don't always use those strategies because it's not right for this person. But yes, when I used to write books and travel around and teach formations, I think I became a better therapist because I had it more clearly in my mind what the options were. And I knew how to think about things more clearly. So I think it made me a better therapist when I would go out and think very clearly about what am I doing, or what are people doing, what's Dr. Erickson doing, or what's NLP doing in this kind of situation. And I would go back to my clients and I would be better at as a therapist because I would be more clear. Here's some possibilities. And when I didn't think about it before, when I was first a therapist, I would sometimes be good and sometimes I wouldn't. I wouldn't know what to do and I would be a little lost. I never got lost after a while. First of all, I had more confidence, but secondly, I had a lot of strategies that I've learned, even some that are, like psychoanalytic that I don't really like that much, but I would use if they worked. It's okay with me.
So if I can translate what you are saying, sometimes a client speaks to you and you say, okay, I'm going to make a reframing, or I'm going to evoke this story. Yeah. How do you function?
Well, first of all, I would never think. I don't think.
Okay.
I used to think when I was first a therapist, then after a while I didn't think. It's like playing tennis. You can't go out there and hit the ball at that level, at the French Open. You cannot do that and think. You just have to know it so well that you trust yourself to respond in that way. And to me, that's the best part of therapy, is that I stopped looking at the ceiling and listening to my models and thinking so much, and more responding to that moment. But I had a repertoire of theories and methods and strategies that I'd studied over the years that hopefully now were part of, all my hours of out there.
Yeah, because you are
practicing.
Unconsciously very good now. But for people who begins, what advice can you give them?
I used to sit and before my client would arrive, I would write out some possible stories. I would write out some possible strategies.
Okay.
So I wouldn't feel so lost. And sometimes I would never use those. But at least I felt more confident. Yeah, I think, now I don't think, and I prefer not to think. Because I trust that that knowledge is there and that strategy is there. And what will come to the foreground with this person right now is exactly what's right for this moment. And it is like playing tennis to me, or really just being there in the moment, and all my focus and concentration is there. And if I think about anything else, I'm going to miss the ball as it goes past. I have listened to videotapes because I'll show them in workshops, and I'll realize the client gave me the solution 3 times before I even hit it back. I'm like, what was I thinking of? They're saying it really clearly right there. And I missed it 3 times. This was early on in my career. Hopefully I don't miss so much as the years went on, but I was shocked how much was going by me that I didn't notice.
Yeah, okay.
Shocked.
Okay, great. Another question from Philippe Miras from France. Do you think society and clients have changed over the 40 years? If so, what impact has this had on your practice?
Yes, I think when I started, there's an old joke in the US, and maybe you have it in France as well, but if you go to see a psychiatrist, you ought to have your head examined. And you know, like, you're crazy if you go see a psychiatrist. Who would go to see a psychiatrist or a therapist? And now people are, it's all over the media. Everyone has a therapist. If you have a couple problem, you go to a couples marriage therapist, couples therapist. I think there's much more openness to the idea of therapy. Celebrities are always talking about going to therapy or rehab and getting addiction treatment. And I think there's a lot more openness to it, which I think is nice. I mean, we can become overly psychologized and overly therapized in the media and in our worlds, but and diagnose everyone, you know. Everyone in the United States and maybe the world knows Donald Trump's psychiatric diagnosis at this point. And I'm not sure that's helpful. Who cares? You know, like, it doesn't matter that much. It doesn't make a difference to know that diagnosis. So I think there's a negative side of it, but mostly it's a positive side. I think from when I started, you had to declare yourself. I'm Lacanian. I'm behaviorist. I'm a cognitive therapist. I'm Gestalt therapist. I'm transactional. I'm an NLP. I think that has gone away. People don't need to be so narrow. They'll study everything and anything and learn from everything. Sometimes one of them appeals to you more and you sort of specialize in that, but you'll learn from everything. And I like that. It used to be much more narrow. You had to be in a school and declare yourself part of that school, and anything outside that school was heresy. That's why, you know, Freudian kicked Jung out and Adler out, and they started Adlerian and Jungian. It's like, that's just stupid. Everybody has an insight into what's helpful to people. Why don't we just learn it all and then use what's right for this client or the patient right in front of us?
Okay, great. Another question from Adrien Moulard. Are there cases where a problem-oriented approach would be more appropriate and recommended rather than a solution-oriented approach?
That's a hard question to answer. Because I have a bias towards a solution-oriented approach, but I would typically start there. But yes, if it didn't work, now I'll go. As I said, I've done a psychoanalytic kind of process with somebody for 12 years because whatever else I was using did not work. And it wasn't helpful to that person. And I'm like, okay, whatever works, I'm okay with that. But yeah, again, to me, the solution-oriented approach is kind of flexible. So it's not saying we'll never talk about problems. We'll talk about problems and we'll use other methods within that. But so it's a hard question for me to answer. I would say yes, no is my answer.
Yeah.
We know.
Okay. And now we are going to speak about the future.
Future.
Because there are past, present, and future. Have you ever used artificial intelligence? And do you think it will?
Yes.
Okay, it will. Do you think it will transform therapy or not, or it's a dangerous thing?
Yes. Yes, I think there'll be its uses. I think there's danger to it too. Yes, it's a dangerous thing too.
Yeah.
It's a helpful thing and a dangerous thing, like most everything, like cell phones. And cell phones are amazing, mobile phones. And then during the pandemic, we discovered that all these kids going on social media, they're depressed, they kill themselves, they compare themselves to other people with social media. There's always an upside and a downside. Yeah, I think artificial intelligence will be helpful. I think it will be an adjunct to therapy sometimes. I think therapists will be able to use it as a consultant. like a supervisor when they don't know something or they want some help or they're trying to talk through something with an AI supervisor, colleague, whatever. Yeah, I actually, it's funny that you say that because I exercise every morning and every evening and I go for long walks. And I've been listening to a book on tape called The Coming Wave, and it's about AI and biological stuff. I think there are some dangers to it. And the guy who wrote that book has an amazing AI, my favorite one, and I've used a few. It's called PI. Your intelligent AI, or what's the, I can't remember the subtitle, but PI, just like pie. And it's on the App Store with Apple and with Android. So I recommend you check it out. It's amazing. It's an incredible app. I can't tell the difference between that and a human being. And every other one I could tell it wasn't very good. It wasn't like a human being. I could tell it wasn't a human being. And it was at times really weird. And this one's not weird at all. I'm shocked. And I read the reviews and people are using it when they're anxious or depressed and at home and just talking to it when they don't want to call up their friends at 3 a.m. because they've too much done that. And they said, I never review apps, but this one really helped me. It helps me when I'm anxious. It helps me when I'm depressed, when I'm lonely. Like, wow, that's a good thing. But again, it will be carried on in unhelpful ways too, you know.
Okay, great. Are there any recent innovation that you found exciting for you?
No, I'm not so much in the therapy world, the change world anymore. I've left it behind. We've spoken about that. I stopped my practice a while ago, and about 15 years ago, I mostly stopped creating courses and doing workshops, and I put all of my work online. I still write books on occasion about things that I knew about before, but I'm more interested. I retired from the psychotherapy and change work, and I'm doing songwriting and music, and I love that. And so mostly I've been paying attention to that. But before I did that, I didn't notice a lot of new stuff. The last new wave that came through for me was narrative therapy, which I enjoyed quite a bit out of Australia. And David Epstein and Michael White were a lot of the instigators of that. And I thought that was a really interesting approach, which had, drew upon some actually French philosophers, to Foucault and other people to inform that therapy. So it had a political and contextual component, which was pretty cool. And they used language in a nice way, I think, to externalize problems. And it was a nice frame of reference. And that was the last one I got excited about. And then it seemed to me, other things were sort of variation on the theme. I haven't seen too much new come through. There'll probably be new things when, artificial biology and neurology comes in, assisted by AI, that'll really shift things, I think. But no, I'm not that up on new things.
Okay, great. And a last question. Now you do a lot of music. Is the purpose of life vibration?
Well, I think one has to discover the purpose of life for oneself. I've figured it out for myself. I think everyone has to wrestle with that existential question. But yes, if I were going to say what's the essence of life, it's vibration and patterns. I mean, DNA is all patterns. The stars are the universe is all patterns. Physics is all patterns. It's quarks and patterns and quarks are vibration. They're vibrational patterns. Yes. So yes, and there again, music, there's all these songs about good vibes only. I mean, really, vibrations, good vibrations, the Beach Boys sang. Good vibrations. But there's bad vibrations too, there's neutral vibrations. But yeah, I think it's vibrations, patterns, and connections and disconnections. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill. It's a very, very cool. It's awesomeness, which is a nominalization.
De rien. Thank you for having me, Gilles, and thank you for doing this in English. I know that was a challenge, because it's not your first language, but I really appreciate that. I know enough French to understand some things, but I couldn't answer in French and I couldn't understand the nuances. So thank you for doing this in English and offering the translation to the people who are going to listen.
Okay. So thank you very much, and have a nice day or evening, or I don't know, day, I think.
It's day. I'm in the Caribbean, and I'm in the island of Bonaire.
Yes.
This is my house down here.
It's giant cactus on,
Yeah, there's cactus. There's cactus around, and then there's my swimming pool right behind us.
Oh, yeah.
I've gotten hot. I'm going to go take a swim, and you all stay cold where you are.
Okay.
That's it. So I can feel... And you can feel even happier about being in the Caribbean.
Okay, so thank you very much, Bill. And if you can send your voice,
I will send you the audio
so that I can, make the
edit
stuff.
it in. That's good.
Bye bye.
All right, merci. Bye bye.
Merci.